We are live. Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me, Evan. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to see you. And I love that you are sitting right in front of the Capitol building, which is beautiful. And, I want to, start by saying the purpose of this podcast is to really do a lot of the stuff that you seem to speak about, which is kind of common sense approaches to things, bringing people together to find common solutions and working through that and figuring out what needs to really be done to make that happen. And as I like to say, destroying this us and them agenda and really just recognizing that lots of perspectives can help drive better solutions, right?
Yeah, that's exactly true.
Well, that's why we're here. And I guess the first I should say, I love your goatee. I definitely, people are going to think I'm weird because I always start these things with recognizing facial hair as a bald man. It's important to me.
Well, my wife likes it, and that's all that matters to me. So that's why we have it. And anyway, so I've had it for a long time. She likes it, and been married 23 years to a wonderful wife, got 3 children. And if she's happy, I'm happy.
Ain't that the truth? I love it. Well, it's actually one of the things I've heard you say before is, you and your wife or people and their spouses don't always agree, right? That's normal.
That's true. That's very true.
And yeah, please, jump into that.
Well, I'm sure you're aware, Evan, that I ran for the state assembly in 2012 and took office in 2012 and served 6.5 years in the state assembly. And then my senator, which was Senator Gaines, went to the Board of Equalization. There was a special election and I won the special election in the Senate. And so we had done a lot of work, both Megan and I, my wife, and having senators and assembly members to our farm and to our district. We live most people think of Northern California, they think of, San Francisco and Sacramento. And we're 4.5 hours north of Sacramento. So we decided that we would bring legislators out to our district and explain to them, our way of life. And the one size fits all legislation didn't work. So we hosted many, like 127 legislators, and that's separate legislators. Many of them came more than once after they loved our area and liked our hospitality. And so Megan actually knew a lot of the legislators. And so when I went to the state Senate, we were like, who's going to take my place in the state assembly? And Megan had served on a school board for years. And I'm like, Megan, maybe you should do it. You know all these members. You know the issues of our district. And so we decided that she would run. And it's pretty awesome. She won. And so we both served. She took my place in the assembly. She's an assemblywoman representing the 1st Assembly District. I represent the 1st Senate District. And so she had a relationship. She's done very well. I know that you're going to ask this question, so I'm just going to say it anyway. We do not always vote the same. And quite frankly, it's amazing. The first year it was maybe 3 or 4 votes, but last year, I think it might have been over 10 votes that we were on the opposite side of the piece of legislation. And people ask us about it, reporters ask us, it's like, how does that work? And I say, well, we've been married 23 years. We've had plenty of disputes about how we should raise our children or how we should do our business. But we have a common goal, which is in the case of legislation, it's better California. We don't always have to agree. And we need more of that. And actually in government, it works our marriage. We're happily married. We have 3 children. We have 2 sons. Our oldest one is home running our business right now. Our middle son is here in Sacramento with us, took us some time off from college to help on the campaign. And we have a 12-year-old daughter who goes to school in Sacramento. So we rent a house here in Sacramento, still have our farm of 92 years the Dahles have been farming in California. It's why I'm running for governor. I don't want to leave California. It's been a struggle for our business and for our communities and for Californians. So we seem to be able to get through the processes of voting against each other and still have a goal for a better California. And we need that, between Democrats and Republicans. We have really had one side in California for 25 years. The legislature has been controlled by the Democrats, and the governorship for the last, 2 terms 2.5 terms, I should say. And here we are. And we have, lots of issues in California that need some balance. So that's what we're about. We love California. We're not leaving. And that's why I'm running for governor.
Yeah. And I mean, the idea of that you and your wife vote differently I think says something to the possibility that people can think differently and still love each other, or if you don't love each other, you can at least live respectfully towards one another, right? And appreciate their come from and their and what they're valuing in this moment or their approach for something. So, I mean, I think that's a sign that it is possible that we all can just get along. Do you?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I think the goal is, at least I've found in the years I've been in the legislature and in local government, is that let's find the things that we agree on. And so I'm going to give you an example of, so Reggie Jones Sawyer, who represents USC, Compton. I don't know what his new district's like, but that's what his district was like. I put out an email to all legislators when I first came. If you'll come to my district, I'll pay your way. If you'll invite me to your district, I'll pay my way to your district. And I would do that. So Anthony Rendon took me up on it. I went to his district. I went to Reggie Jones Sawyer's. But when I got to Reggie Jones Sawyer's district, we went to USC, saw the space shuttle and went to the campus there, and beautiful. And then we went down to, Florence and Normandy, where the Rodney King riots were. And that's a whole different, just in his small district, which he can get across in 20 minutes. And it takes, 6 hours to get across my district. But I had him up to my district. And the thing we have in common is we both have boys and men of color who are struggling. In my district, it's Native Americans. Highest suicide rate for young men is Native Americans, 18 to 25. And in his district, it's young Black men. And so we work together on that issue. That is the issue that him and I can come together. We disagree on policies of how we should do law enforcement. We disagree on a lot of things, but that one thing we can agree on, and we work on that one thing. And so that's been my goal, is to find the things that we can work on, the things that we can't work on. I want to educate more. Why do I think the way I think? Why is it that I think we should do it a different way? And I've had great success in not only a lot of legislation, big pieces of legislation that have been passed don't have my name on them, but I was able to insert my philosophy and be able to change those pieces of legislation for the better, because I have those relationships and respect in Sacramento. And so that's what I will bring as governor. I will have every single member into my office. This governor can't say that, because there's Democrats that haven't been in his office. I fortunately have had a few conversations with him in his office on legislation that I was passionate about, and we got passed. But that's what we need more of. We need more of working together. And I learned it actually as a county supervisor, where we had a lot of environmental issues in our districts over what we were going to do in the forest. So spotted owl, if you recall, back in the day, it was very controversial about how we're going to treat our forest. The Unabomber actually killed a California Forestry Association member, Gil Murray. There's a tree dedicated to him here at the Capitol. And there was a lot of strain. So we sat down in a library, actually, Quincy, California, in the library. It's called the Quincy Library Group. We sat down with environmentalists, supervisors, teachers, the Forest Service, and we actually ended up doing a piece of legislation at the national level with Dianne Feinstein as an author and Wally Herger, who was our congressman, so Republican Democrat, and actually got 429 yes votes in the House of Representatives. Amazing that even can happen. More votes than when they declared war on Japan after they bombed Pearl Harbor. We got hung up in the Senate. We eventually got it out of the Senate, but that's where I learned to work with people on different issues and be able to listen and then articulate, because if you can't speak to each other and you're just working in sound bites and extremes, the people lose, because most of the people are in the middle. So that's been my goal as a legislator here in California. I've been very effective at it. Have a lot of great relationships across the aisle. I was asked yesterday or the day before from a Fox 11 news anchor, asked me who's my favorite legislator, and I said Susan Eggman. She's a senator from Stockton. We came in together in the assembly. We have a lot of things we are not on the same page, but she is a very good, decent, awesome friend of mine. And we're both from farming backgrounds. Her dad was a beekeeper. And so she was the chair of agriculture when I was the vice chair in the assembly. We built a relationship. We're close friends. I know her family. She knows mine. She texts me all the time back and forth. We disagree a lot, but we love each other. And that's what we need more of, is people who can sit down and work together in California.
That's great. What's really preventing that? If you had to kind of drill down into what is creating this, and it's on, feels like most issues, right? And a lot of it's because we focus on that stuff. It gets lots of media attention. It gets plenty of engagement, social media clicks and stuff, right? Controversy seems to perform well in news and media, which is a separate topic. But what is it preventing us from focusing on the good stuff, from things that I know that there's, the values and aspirations that so many of us have? I'm going to go with high 90% are all the same values and aspirations. Where are we getting blocked, in your opinion, from making this civil?
Well, I think that we're in a society where we have so much information. I got my cell phone right here in front of me. I mean, and you scroll through it and you get a couple of seconds and you're seeing so much information. It's not like it used to be, where we used to get a daily paper, or we had, a nightly news, and now we have information at our fingertips. And people are polarized, and they tend to get in their camp and not really listen. We don't take time to listen and to communicate in a way where, details matter, right? And policy sound bites are what drives people, and it drives emotion. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more to it than emotion and sound bites. There's actually a policy that has to be implemented, and it has to work. And unfortunately, not only in California, but across our nation, we've become polarized in those sound bites, and we don't take time because we're just not programmed now to take time and actually listen to it all, because a lot of it is about how many people you get to like your stuff, or how many, how big your platform is. And at the end of the day, the guy that's talking about policy, the boring stuff that actually needs to happen, doesn't have a very big platform. And so I fall victim to that, because I'm somebody that likes to get in the weeds. I like policy a lot more than politics. And politics are about, really, to be honest with you, what you say you do, not what you do, because people really never look in to see what happens. And unfortunately, people say things that don't happen, and there's no real good policy behind it. I prefer to talk about policy and then actually implement that and actually give an outcome for my constituents. And that's where I've been able to do that, by educating in a minority in California.
Yeah. And, I suppose one thing I can add onto that is this idea of balance, right? And it's funny, I've been using this word now around in our local elections here in Santa Monica, and I'm starting now. Of course, when you start using it, you start to see it everywhere, right? It's now I'm seeing balance everywhere. It's almost like if you're realizing there's something is too far one way, people say the word balance. I know you use it in your campaign. I believe in balance. I know what balance looks like in my head. Is it different for everyone? Is there real balance here? And how do we get people to realize what balance looks like and approach it in a way that people feel good about, and they can see kind of both sides of the triple beam balance? Say, oh, this is what balance looks like. A little bit of give, a little bit of take, right?
No, I think that the main thing is that you have to look at what the outcome is after you've determined that whatever the soundbite is of the day, or whichever side. What's the result of that? What's the result of whatever policy is being implemented throughout the system we have, which is basically, in my opinion, the pendulum swings back and forth, and when it does, it shifts very fastly because what they've been told is going to happen doesn't always happen. So for me, it's like I look at what I listen to all sides. That's my goal, and then that's the benefit for me in Sacramento is I talk to Democrats all day long. I just don't talk to my people. Actually, I talk to Democrats more than I talk to Republicans, because I want to know what they're thinking, and then I have my opinion, and then I can weigh in and take some of their information and explain why I think it is going to or not going to work, or maybe there's a better way to do it. So the outcomes is what really matters. So if you're not happy with something and you continue to do it, I hear, I'm in California, it's very blue, and it's been a blue state for a long time. And, people talk about, our party, and our party has not been in control for a long time. So if you're not happy, then maybe you should look at who's been doing what, because we really don't have a lot of say in what happens in our legislature and in the policy that comes out of here. So that's been my take. If you like what you're getting, then stick with it. If you're not happy, maybe you ought to dig in and find out why, and then maybe look at some other options. I do that on my farm every day. I mean, look, every year is a new year. You plant your crop, and Mother Nature is really the dictator normally of how your crop's going to come out, whether you get a frost or you have a bug infestation or you didn't water it right or heat or all those things. But those are not things that we worry about in our farm today. We worry about regulatory environment because we're competing on a world market and a national market where if our costs are higher, we can't compete. And so those are how we look at it. And that's the same thing in the legislature. Every bill's a different bill. Every year is a different year. But you have to be able to adjust to the things that are happening politically and try to navigate those just as we do on our farm, so we can put out a product and actually survive as a business.
Sure. One of the things I've noticed is that when we even think about, well, this is a Democratic thing or a Republican thing, it depends on where you are in your context, where that definition even holds its definition, right? It doesn't, like in Santa Monica, for example, it's like far left versus moderate left, maybe. Right? It's like, I think we're 20 or 30% Republican or something, but, in California, I think that's generally representative of California. So when I think, well, what does Republican mean versus Democrat in California versus, the difference of that as it relates to other states, Republican and Democrat in Mississippi could be different, maybe different. And of course, collectively at a federal level, it could be very different as well. Do you feel like the way that people think about Republican and Democrat in California is the same as the way they think about it at the federal level? And is that true or not? Should they or should they not think that way?
Well, I think it's just a reality. Look, California is a very progressive state. And, if you're a Republican in California, you're probably a moderate or Republican somewhere else. If you're in Idaho or Texas, maybe you're not the same. This is because we have a different environment. But to answer your question about like Santa Monica and the differences, I think it's more of your environment. If you're raised in an environment, it's an affluent environment, and there's a wealth, then you don't really understand what it's like to be in an area where there's not wealth and there's poverty. So let's just take, for example, Santa Monica versus the Central Valley, where you have way different income levels and different types of life, or North, where I live, and Southern California. I mean, I live 75 miles away from a Walmart, 110 miles away from a Costco. So public transportation is non-existent. Well, if you're in Santa Monica or you're in Los Angeles, public transportation is available. You might not like it, but it's available. So I think it's a perspective of what your surroundings are and what your life, your income level is, and what you expect. So in California, it's so diverse between all these different jurisdictions. I mean, the difference between Orange County and Los Angeles is different. I mean, and trust me, it's all Southern California to somebody from the north, but it's not all Southern California to people in Southern California, whether you're in San Diego, Orange County, or the Inland Empire, or if you're in San Bernardino. So recognizing California is the 5th largest economy in the world, and we're so diverse in so many different ways. And we have so many, it's not like we're known for just our agriculture, or we're known just for our tech, or we're known for the film industry. We're known for almost everything. We are really a leader in the world And so we have to balance those things out. And we have our own conflicts in our own state between regions. And so I think that's the difference between knowing how to balance out California. And we see it when there's voting. I mean, we see very blue areas and very red areas, even in our own state. And it's quite frankly because that's that there's a difference of opinion in California because of your geographic location and your income level.
So we are more similar than we even think, but we are very diverse.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're in, Nevada, it is nothing like California when it comes to just our economies and the people that live here and our tax structures. So a Republican in California is going to be way different than a Republican in Nevada, or a Democrat in Nevada is going to be different than a Democrat in California. I guess that's what I'm trying to explain and it's because California is an amazing, diverse, awesome state that has a lot of different moving pieces.
Yeah, and even on things that I hear both sides say that are important to them, and I know you're all about things as a Republican that I think Democrats would say are great, right? In the environment.
Yeah, I align a lot.
Energy, transportation.
Yeah, I think that the one thing is when we talk about the environment, I've taken my colleagues to task. Not to task, or maybe to educate them in how I look at the environment. I mean, I'm a farmer. We've been farming the same ground for a long, long time, and we do not want to damage it anyway. We do certified organic. We are stewards of the land. And that's how I look at California. When we talk about the environment, I mean, we should talk about that for a minute. We produce the fifth largest economy in the world, produces 1% of global emissions. Well, there's still global emissions, right? That's what we're talking about, the environment for the globe. And when we offshore our products that the fifth largest economy in the country or in the world uses to other countries like China, where they're building coal-fired power plants to provide us with cement or things we use in California, fertilizer, then what are we really talking about? We're not really helping the environment. We can do it in California with the best technology, the more environmentally friendly ways, and actually make Californians and reduce carbon. So those are the things I talk to my legislators about on the other side of the aisle. Is like, hey, wait a minute, why are you pushing those jobs to just other countries? Why don't we keep those jobs here, which we can reduce the emissions and actually show the world how to do it and provide the products that we all need to live a lifestyle that we expect in a developed country.
Actually, there's one more thing I've heard you mention too, and it's that the black carbon from forest fires is not actually even counted towards for the emissions for the state. Can you explain a little bit about that? Why do we do? Why don't we count that, and how come that's not known?
It's one of my biggest frustrations as somebody who represents 60% of California's water comes from my district. It's a lot of water. So I have Shasta Reservoir, Shasta Dam. I have Oroville, and I have Folsom, all in my district. But there's not just those reservoirs, but there's a watershed above that. We had a 1 million acre fire last year, and the Dixie fire year, almost 980,000 acres. It's crazy that we are burning up that much of our watershed. And I did a bill that I found out. I thought we counted carbon from forest fires, but we don't. And so a dead forest that is burned emits carbon and methane when it decomposes, both adding to the climate. But we don't count that in California's carbon emissions. So I did a bill, and they wanted me to amend the bill. And I said, no, I just want to simply force California Air Resources Board to count the carbon because it's emissions and we don't count those. And my bill didn't get out of the first committee. It's environmental quality, which I'm on the committee. And many of the members they didn't debate me because they just didn't want to do it because it means we have to pay attention to it and we have to actually do something more than we're doing. And my logic behind that is that we've impaired the forest. So almost 100 years of fire suppression, which is not natural. Fires burned in California, lightning would strike and they would burn for literally months until the fall rains came. About every 10 years, our forest would burn. And when it burned, it thinned out the forest. It left these beautiful ponderosa pines and sequoias, big trees, but the understory and the smaller trees died in the process of the fire. And so with that means that our spacing between trees was wider. Well, now we've suppressed fire. The Smokey the Bear campaign, the putting out of fires. We have, where we used to have 200 trees per acre, we have maybe 1,000 trees per acre. Well, they're all sucking water out of the ground and using up the supply of snowpack and water that's there. And when we do get in a drought, they get stressed, bark beetles come in, and the bark beetle basically lays its eggs under the bark. And when it's doing that, when the tree's healthy and has plenty of water in the tree produces sap or pitch, which is commonly known, and it pushes that bark beetle back out and doesn't allow those eggs to hatch. When you don't have water, they die. The bark beetles come in, they kill the trees. We lost literally millions of trees to bark beetle, and then lightning strikes or a human-caused fire, and we see these catastrophic fires because there's so much fuel, and the trees are so close together that it's burning from tree to tree, not on the ground like it would if it was spread out. So I've had all these members out, and I show them where we thin the forest mechanically, and then where it wasn't thinned, and the fire comes through, and we still have a forest that's alive after the fire comes through because the fire comes from the top of the trees down to the bottom, goes across the ground, leaves the trees alive. So a tree can sequester carbon. That's actually a carbon sink. It's a place where we can remember, like fifth grade, when they told you what we breathe out, the trees breathe in. Well, it still works if their tree is alive in the forest. So I've been really critical of our policies around forestry because we don't count it, and we should be. It's the cheapest place to do it. We can get more bang for our buck other than building a train to nowhere for $4.5 billion this year. We spent on a train. If we would have put that into thinning out our forest, can you imagine what it's like when a fire comes in? We still have a live forest. We have a watershed that's healthy. We have wildlife that's there. Nature's back to normal. Those are the things that I promote as an environmentalist in California. And I am an environmentalist. I mean, I do everything on our farm to try to reduce my impact, but still at the same time provide a product that Californians have to have daily.
So do you think that we didn't count it for a reason, or is it just an oversight, or is it just so much drastically higher that it makes California look like the worst emitter of anywhere ever by a million times? Like what? Yeah.
It's really easy to go out and get that soundbite saying I'm leading the way because we're going to go electric cars when you're really not leading. If you went out and said, hey, we're really not leading, but I want to force you into an electric car. By the way, I'm emitting more. I debated, in the conversation about my bill, they're like, well, we would have to spend money on that. And our whole process would have to be upended. I'm like, yes. So admitting that we are not doing it right is the first step. Second step is then funding the things that we should do to correct the problem. And it was the same year I ran the bill that they did the regulating of your lawnmower, your weed eater, your generator. You can't have any of those. By 2024, you're not going to be able to buy those in California. So imagine the power goes out and you can't put gas in your generator. And they were saying it was because there was smoke in the air. Look at all this climate change. Well, it's happening from the fire. It had nothing to do with the lawnmower, the weed eater, and the generator. And that's the hypocrisy that I think needs to be expanded on and talked about. And by the way, I did a speech on the floor because I was very, animated and frustrated that they're passing this bill to regulate chainsaws, something I need to go thin the forest. And they censored it. They took it down off of Facebook. They said it was, this is a speech on the Senate floor. So I think that's unfortunate that we've come to a place where, our speech has been somewhat squashed. Yeah. Facebook took it down. I got throttled and was not able to, it got took down.
They deleted it, like they removed it from public view. Oh, wow.
Yes.
What was it? Was it called misinformation or something? Is that why? Yeah. Why would they do that?
I don't. They just took it down. They don't really explain a lot. I think it backfired some because we put up censored and then emailed it out, and we actually got more traction probably than we would have if they would have left it up. But the point is that it's common sense approach. Nobody stood up and said I was wrong on the floor. They just voted their bill out and moved on. And so those are the things that are frustrating for me as somebody who wants to really make a difference on the environment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you think there's an escalated commitment to the way that people, like, I almost see this at all levels of politics, where once you start an initiative and work really, really hard, and you invest and you raise money and you do tons of rhetoric and talking about it on all the different, media publications or whatever, and it's 3 years later and the policy goes through, now it's sort of like has to work or else your reputation's at stake, right? Or the perception of that you may. So I'm just wondering if the psychology around this, or maybe it's sociology in this case, but is there an escalated commitment to putting something forth, having to be right about it, and not having the humility to say, hey, it was good, but there are surely some things we can, make adjustments on. There's learning here. Not all of it was bad, or maybe it was all bad. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. So I've been very critical of the high-speed train in the Valley. And I mean, I sit on the budget committee and I speak about it every 3 years. We get a new administrator. Since I've been here 10 years, there's been 3 new administrators. So every 3 years it fails. And then we get a new administrator and he comes in or he or she or whatever and says, well, the last person just, we're getting a fresh start and we keep dumping money into it. And then, so finally, after the third one, and I ask the same questions every single time. Hey, what have we laid 1 foot of track? We've spent almost $10 billion and we haven't laid 1 foot of track. And we were supposed to have it done by 2020. And now they're talking about 2030, which it won't be done in 2030. And it's going to cost $105 billion. So I don't want to spend that money. I'd rather build a reservoir and create more water in California than waste it on a train. So I got up on the floor and I said, I'm going to put this in farmer terms so you maybe can understand where I'm coming from here. So as a farmer, sometimes you plant your field and you don't get a really good stand. Your germination wasn't right. Maybe you planted your seed too deep. Something happened. And so now you're looking at your field and you got a crop you put all your money into it, but it's probably not going to yield enough to pay back. Do you now fertilize it some more? Do you water it some more? Or do you just plow the field down and start over? Well, I said, I think we need to just plow down this train because we're going nowhere and we're spending a lot of money. And what's the end result going to be? The end result is going to be, they're talking about it only to be not a high-speed train with 2 tracks, 1 track and a diesel engine at this point, just to get something done. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? At the billions of dollars going out there. So I was critical of that. And I look at it in a common sense approach. Look, admit we made a mistake. It's okay. But don't continue to dump good money after bad. And when we could use those resources, which are limited, in a place like Building Sites Reservoir, where we have an off-stream storage facility that everybody likes, environmentalists like it, farmers like it, cities like it, fish like it. Let's go build that and actually do something for California that's positive and is going to drop down the cost of food, help fish in our environment, and help Californians be able to take a shower. So those are the things I look at every day. And I do it in my business. It's no different in my business. Look, I've made thousands of mistakes. I learned from them, but I don't do them again. And when I'm into something that doesn't work, I change because I have to change because my competitor is going to be right there doing the same thing and I have to compete. The unfortunate thing about government is we have no competition. When you fail in government, you just throw more money at it, get a new administrator, and keep going. That's wrong. And we need to recognize that and say it and be upfront to the people about it and say, look, there was a mistake made. Let's move on. And I will do that as your governor. I will have those conversations. And then you have to get it through the legislature, but at least have the conversation and say, look, this is what you're up against. If you really want to finish this project, it's not going to be 105 billion. It may be 150 billion. And it may be a slow train to nowhere, which nobody's going to use. Let's talk about those things and be honest with Californians because they know something's not right. Their food's going higher. Their gas is going higher. Their schools aren't working. Our forest is burning down. We don't have water. We have homeless people everywhere. I mean, so at the end of the day, I believe my friends across the aisle want better things, but we have to be transparent. And the other thing that you should know is that there's a lot of power brokers in Sacramento, and they don't care. They care about one thing, the people they represent. So I was an operating engineer. I was actually in the operating engineers union when I was younger. I ran bulldozers and did blasting and quarry work, and was in the operating engineers. But their goal here in Sacramento is to make sure the trades that their people work. Doesn't matter if they're building a pipeline or a reservoir or a train to nowhere, their people are working. And that's unfortunate because they're very powerful. We need to put them on projects that we know are going to get a return for Californians and work. On these projects that don't work, we need to scrap them and move forward.
Isn't planning fallacy almost a law when it comes to these large projects at this point? I mean, it's generally understood that on any project, we tend to underestimate how long it takes and how expensive it will be, even at a personal management level, right? We're event planning. Oh, it's only going to take an hour. It's probably going to take like 2 or 3, right? Like that's just classic. Again, this is like psychology stuff. But at an organizational level, and again, I know this as well as I'm a software entrepreneur, right? So I built enough things to know and had enough projects to see and managed enough where it's like, all right, well, it was supposed to take this long. I sort of started accounting for planning fallacy. It's very easy to do that.
Absolutely.
Why don't we account for planning fallacy? Why isn't that obvious? Why is that not in the contract when we're working with people? Well, it's like, well, we had this on the 405, right? It was $1 billion. I'm sure you know this very well, right? The 405 was like, it was supposed to be $1 billion and take, I forget exactly, I don't know, a year or two. And it was like $1.5 billion and took more than that. And again, I forget the exact numbers, but it was longer and more expensive. It was obvious. And then people are like, what? It's going to be $1.5 billion. And you're like, yeah, of course. That's how it works.
Well, I mean, we've seen that time and time again. And that's not always the, estimators' issue. Inflation plays a big role in that too. I mean, we saw the Bay Bridge was billions over, when they built the Bay Bridge. We see that a lot of time. We see it in private side. I worked in construction. We had, obviously, we tried to figure what inflation is going to be. And for example, for today, when you see, diesel fuel and gasoline go up 80 cents in a week. I mean, if you're an estimator, you can't figure that in. And that drives the cost of everything. That's what's happening in California right now. Our energy costs are skyrocketing, which means a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk is going to go up. I mean, we have a trucking business. It's been in the last 8 months, it's $200 a day per truck for just diesel. So that's $1,000 a week. That's $4,000 a month that we have to up our price to move anything that we move. And look, drive down I-5. I was on it last night, and it's, there's tens of thousands of trucks in California, or hundreds of thousands, I should say, moving freight, moving the things we need to live and eat and use for building and all those things. And that's inflation. It's going to go up. So if you're on a fixed income, so if you're an hourly wage earner, or you're a retiree who's on a fixed income, man, you're just getting crushed right now. So the fastest way for inflation to go down is drive down the cost of energy in California. That's the number one way to drive down inflation, because if you can drive down, a gallon of diesel by 50%, everybody's going to save across the board, no matter what, because your cost of everything that you need to live every day will go down. Yeah. Well, I guess the question is, how do you do that significantly enough where things start becoming cheaper? What changes need to be made? And then, of course, execution is everything, right? We can say it, but what do we really need to do to make that happen? Well, I mean, policies like taxing the income of a corporation, oil corporation, when, by the way, the biggest driver of our cost per gallon over other states is our taxes. So I don't know if you know the breakdown per gallon and per dollar, what it is in California, but I can tell you what it is. So tell everyone what it is, because even if I know, I'm sure a lot of people don't. So first of all, so let's just take $7 a gallon. Let's just take that number. So there's 22 cents per gallon. That's not per dollar, but per gallon. That goes to the Carbon Air Resources Board. That's paid off the top. So 22 cents per gallon. Then you have 7.5 cents per dollar, right? Our sales tax. So there's another 35 cents in sales tax that you have on a gallon of gas at $7. Then you have 54 cents for the Highway Improvement Fund, which is what we use to build our roads and our bridges and that part of it. And then on top of that, you have a federal tax, which is like 18 cents. And so when you get all those added up, you're at about $1.28. So at $1.28, then on top of that, you have a special blend in California that you can't bring in that type. So you can't bring fuel from Texas in because we have a special blend that we have to make in California for our air quality process. That's what's happening right now. We have a special blend and we only refine it in California, and our refineries are short because they're maintenance.
So they charge us more for the special blend?
Yes, they charge you more because it's a special blend, costs more to make. It's like me when I have 2 different varieties of seed and they want me to blend it. I have to put them together so they can grow them together in the field. I have to charge more for that. So it's just the same thing. It's a blend. So those are all reasons why Californians pay more taxes. And, I'm sorry, my friend Gavin Newsom, who's talking about taxing them again, the state is the biggest tax. If you drop that tax 54 cents, which we actually asked to do, it's about $1,600 a year per family. Now you're going to get a couple $100 here in a week or so, or maybe $1,000 from Gavin Newsom if you meet a certain income right here before we get the vote. But at the end of the day, we had the money in the budget, $101 billion, to backfill the $8 or $9 billion that the tax would have collected naturally. We could have backfilled it, took care of our roads, and it would have dropped the cost across the board. But that's not what the legislature chose to do. The legislature chose to give you a check, with Gavin Newsom's signature on it so that maybe he can get reelected, I guess. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's why. So those are the things that are
that's a pattern, isn't it, of how politics works in general?
And that's unfortunate because Californians are suffering, and we can actually do a better job of giving them a break across the board. And if you're very wealthy, you don't see it. But if you're poor, you really see it. And there's no middle class in California. The richer are getting richer, and the poor are definitely getting poor. And those of us in the middle class are getting squeezed out too. I mean, I cannot tell you how many of my friends that own small business. I have a friend that's a farmer. He actually sold his land, took his cattle and his equipment, and moved to Texas and bought a farm in Texas. I couldn't believe it. But it's happening in the valley. Lots of the farmers are walking away from their farms or putting conservation easement on them and going to Chile and other places and growing the same products that we need and shipping into California. It's not good for California.
The irony is that California has so much land. Like, it is a huge state with a ton of open space. Most of California is open space.
Yeah.
Why is there an opportunity to think about the open space land in a different way? And I guess this is, as it relates to energy, it's as it relates to housing. When we say like people are leaving California because everything's managed under this umbrella, is there an opportunity to rethink how we're using some of this space?
Well, there's been lots of legislation over the years. I'm a big proponent of what they call the Williamson Act. Was a legislator that passed a law that gives a tax break to farmers to keep their open space and not develop it. That's gone by the wayside. They don't do that anymore. They don't fund it, quite frankly. So I hate to see good farmland in California developed and put houses on it. It happens right here in Sacramento. It just kills me. This is some of the greatest fertile soil in the world, by the way. And I think we should develop in areas where we don't see such, high dollar valued land. But when you talk about open space, I was in Los Angeles yesterday, and it's pretty crowded down there.
And and I'm not even talking about in the cities. I mean, you have to go outside of the.
But think about it. The people who want to protect everything or wanting to protect stuff in my area where we have open space because they don't have it in their own backyard. Again, it's back to that perspective of where you're from. And, really, we need more parks in the inner city so people have a place to. Here in Sacramento, we rent a house in Sacramento. There's a park right down the street from our house, and I cannot tell you, it's packed every night. Little kids in that little park. And I'm thinking, man, I mean, we own a farm, lots of acres, and it's wide open. And I'm used to just, our kids run everywhere. And camping is something we do even out where we're at. But if you're in the inner city or you're in even Sacramento, you're kind of confined to your area. So there's a different perspective. So when they say protecting open space, they want to protect everything, even though, it's because of their perspective. So I think there's a balance that needs to be had. We need more parks in the inner city, and we need to develop in places where it's not high duller land where we still have the resources to do public transit. We still have the ability to do, we need residential. There's been an attack on residential homes in California. There's been all kinds of legislation that you can build up, but you can't build out. And that's unfortunate because most Californians want a backyard and a place to raise their family.
And also to not be far from their family, right? Like, I think some of this comes down to like when we say like, oh, well, let's build something on the outskirts of Los Angeles. There's plenty of space, right? Well, you don't want to be, then you have to, I guess, travel to work is harder, or you have to, it's harder to see your family. People don't want to leave their communities, essentially, right? So sometimes I think there's a balance there of like, what are we willing to keep and what are we willing to expand on?
Well, I would say that I think the biggest challenge for California is when you want to be free to be able to work is access to infrastructure like internet. I mean, we passed lots of legislation. People would love to live in my district and be able to do coding for a company in San Francisco and not have to drive into San Francisco. But unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth in my community to allow that. So, technology is obviously changing. We see Elon Musk with his internet which I know my neighbors have, and they love it. It works great. So maybe we'll see some opportunity for people to actually live further away from their work and not be so confined and change their lifestyle and not be so much in traffic every day, which I think would be awesome. So those are things I work on every day in the California. It's amazing. Inner city poor kids have the same internet problems as poor kids in Lassen County where I live.
Well, people are willing to leave the state for this stuff.
Yeah.
So isn't there an opportunity somewhere farther deep in the state to keep them?
Well, I work at it every day. I work at it every day to make sure that Californians are level the playing field. And, again, I mentioned earlier, it's a diverse state and there's a cost to it all. And, you have to have the ability to pay it back and not put the burden on the taxpayers as much. But people will pay for services if they can get them for a better quality of life. And that's for sure. And everybody makes those decisions. I mean, you choose areas to buy your home based on what kind of education system set up in that place, because you want your kids to have a better education than maybe some other places. So those are always choices that we have to make. And as government, we should try to do the best we can to make sure that everybody has an opportunity, and choice in that area needs to be available.
Yeah, I just got, I saw that we're ranking pretty low on education. So that's not really keeping people here, I suppose, either.
Well, 50,000 students didn't show up to LA Unified School District just this last year. There was 27,000 the year before that have checked out. It used to be the largest school district in the nation. And why is that? It's because parents, they will, if they can, do everything they can to help make sure their kids get a good education and try to, all of us do it. I'm a parent. I want my kids to have a better life than I did and better opportunities. And you'll go to great lengths to do that. And I think parents are seeing that. It's unfortunate that we spend a lot of money in California, but we don't get very good results.
Well, we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to segue that into a different question. I don't know if we're going to be able to be concise, but okay, we can try. Bureaucracy.
Plenty of it.
Sure is. The government in general, all government feels like, as we call it spaghetti code in software, but it feels like a bowl of spaghetti. So I started using this just like where in order to change one thing, you have to pull the spaghetti out from all the other pieces of spaghetti and untangle it it has to untangle itself a million times. So what's going on here? Like, is there, we can't get things done. You mentioned there was a policy that took a very simple policy just for schools to show their curriculum. Is that right? That took 2 years to get done?
I never got it out. No,
never got it out.
Yeah, sex education. I just wanted to post sex education so parents knew, and it got killed. But let's talk about bureaucracy for a minute, because I think I can sum it up pretty easy for you. This is one thing I worked on for years. County supervisor, I put the unemployment department in our county next to the job workforce department. Can you imagine that? They were on opposite ends of the town. You put them in next to each other. So if somebody comes in for unemployment, they go, hey, there's people looking for work right here. So that's an example of getting things done. Did that at the local level.
Right there.
Yeah, it's like common sense again. It's like you don't have to be that smart to figure that one out. But we should have an app. We should have an app for our DMV. Look, let's put this stuff on. I know they're doing a lot of stuff online, but at the end of the day, we need to make it so that the government actually works and there's a product. I cannot tell you the tens of thousands of phone calls we've had over the 10 years of people just trying to get an EDD check or get through the DMV or get some paperwork from the Board of Equalization signed. And I have a stack of people who thank me because we just connected them to the right people. We have to make government more streamlined, more user-friendly. And unfortunately, I mean, our systems are antiquated. We're in the, tech capital of the world. Supposedly, our state doesn't run like it. But
what's the bottleneck there? What's the bottleneck there? Is it unions? Is it just the ability for people to adapt? Like there's some basic stuff. I see basic stuff, especially with the DMV. I'm like, this could so easily cost them zero. What's going on? Like, what would you say is the bottleneck?
There is the unions that don't want to lose any more membership. All right, they're in the business of growing their membership. The more membership you have, the more money you raise, the more power you get. That's a fact. All unions, mainly public unions, are that way. Private unions, like the trades, the guys I worked for, they have to compete, they have to bid. So they're not in that boat as much, but public unions are. So if you streamline the process at the DMV, that means less bodies. It means drives down the cost of your everything. And then there you got a union opposing you. So there are opportunities though. I did this in 2008. We did it in our own county. Everybody was laying people off. It'll happen again when the stock market goes down and California plummets, people will be getting laid off. But the way to do it is not lay anybody off. As people retire, let them retire and then don't fill that position. It's a great way to not harm anybody that's got a job and then reduce that, streamline the agency and make it work for Californians. That's what I'm going to plan. That's my plan to make California work again. So the EDD, the California Air Resource Board, the Board of Equalization, all those things that businesses have to deal with every day need to be streamlined so they can just get it done. I mean, we're a small business. We have to hire an accountant and a bookkeeper to keep us just in the lines of the law. Those are all things that drive down the productivity of Californians and up the cost. And that's why people leave. Those are things I'll be working on when I become governor.
I will say common sense. It does sound like a balanced thought that you don't have to rehire for that same position, let it expire.
Yeah. So because when you don't want anybody to lose their job, at the end of the day, and how it works when you have cutbacks is the last in is the first out, which is usually your younger employee with a family just bought a house. The person that's towards retirement usually owns, their family's grown, they're out, and those are the people that stay. It's unfortunate because the person that's starting out is starting out in life, and we should retire those people and not keep those other ones in there, not lay them off. And that's what we did. But during the 2008 shutdown, our county took a 1.2% decrease in benefits and salary, and we never laid off a person. Counties all around us were laying off 35%. And then as people retired, we shuffled them around and everybody was happy. That's what leaders do. That's common sense. It's what I would do in my own business with my own employees. I'd sit down with them and say, hey, here's where we're at today. Here's how we're going to get through this. Yeah. You want to be on my team? And there usually are because they want a job and they're part of our team. We need these people in government. I don't have anything against them, but we can do it more efficient.
There's a guy I call it could be a girl that I call the stamper. And this person takes the doc. So I won't throw any specific the person or the government under the bus who did this, but I filled out a form online and then I saw that it was posted online, but it had a stamp, like a manual, like a hand, like the old school stamp, like filed. And then I'm like, so they had me do the online process. Then they printed it out so they could put the stamp on it, stamped it, scanned it back online. And I didn't even know what to say. I sort of just swallowed and tried not to get too frustrated. But that's the kind of taxpayer dollars where I'm like, why would you run through that? And I know there's a reason. I'm sure there's a good reason of why each one of these people are stuck. It's a bowl of spaghetti is my theory. And that sometimes it's not a priority to get out of that particular bowl of spaghetti. But I hope we can do something because it really is. Well,
you got to pull one noodle out at a time, and pretty soon you have no noodles left in your bowl, and you can do it.
Oh, I love that. We just went so much farther with the spaghetti analogy.
It's what we do every day in business. We figure, if you can save a few bucks here or do it faster there. At the end of the day, it's more profit for your employees and for yourself, and that's what we do. And more competition, so you can stay in business, because the guy down the street is doing the exact same thing, and you have to be competitive.
Well, I hear you, and this was a wonderful hour together. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thank you.
I really enjoyed this conversation, and congratulations on even just getting your hat in the ring to compete for to get some other candidates out there so people can have a choice. And I respect everyone who makes that hard decision. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy, it's a lot of work. And especially when people care so much about it, like yourself, obviously, I know how important it is to you. So thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit more about my policies and the things I care about. I appreciate it. I'd love to have your vote, by the way. I know that you don't have to answer me.
I had a feeling you were going to ask me that. Thank you. And why don't we do a fist bump? Can you do like a fist bump?
Got it.
There we go.
And go to briandahle.com. I know you've been there, but check it out.
Sure have. briandahle.com and learn more about it.
Go out and vote. We need people to vote. There's very low turnout. I hope people will go vote. That's something we really need.
Yeah. Brian, thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Good to meet you online. Hopefully in person someday.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
You too.